Good evening again, Mayor, Council members. The second item in front of you is the addition of 2 community service officers. The role of the community service officer is to perform routine, non-sworn field and office law enforcement related duties. Community service officers make citizens contacts. They promote positive public relations for the department. They write incident documentation. They collect and account for evidence. They process crime scenes. They assist sworn personnel in special events, and they perform other related work as assigned. Community service officers, and I'll refer to them as CSOs after this, allow sworn officers the ability to conduct more proactive patrolling by their ability to respond to a multitude of calls without suspects. They enable, and sworn officers, by the way, are officers that have gone to the academy. They carry weapons. They respond to all types of calls with suspects, where the CSOs would not. They enable officers to spend less time at traffic accidents and in in-depth crime scenes through the CSO's ability to provide traffic control and process crime scenes for evidence. This allows the officers more time to focus attention to ongoing in-progress crimes. Some additional benefits that result from utilizing CSOs are officers can respond more rapidly to calls, as they are not tied up on a cold call as much. The patrol officers are available to spend more time proactively looking for crime, as well as more time for directed enforcement, as the CSOs spend more time on these calls helping the officers out, and they don't have to respond to them. In the 2009-2010 fiscal budget year, the Yuba City Police Department had 8 positions for the community service officers. In 2016-17, that number had been reduced to 4 full-time CSOs, 1 crime analyst who is also a lead CSO who spends 50% of their time as a CSO, 50% of the time working as a crime analyst. The crime analyst position was a full-time position in 2009-2010, which was lost due to retirement and consolidation also. The number of calls for service increased in that same time period from 2009, from 44,856 in 2009 to 2015, which shows 45,652 calls for service. As a result of the increase in calls for service, sworn staff shortages in that period of time, and less CSOs available to answer calls, the amount of available time for directed enforcement and proactive patrolling by the sworn officers was significantly impacted. Officers also had less time to engage in directed enforcement and in community events such as neighborhood watch program meetings and other time to spend with the community. Hiring a patrol officer is a very time-intensive process. It can take a brand new officer 13 months from the time that we do our initial testing until the time they become an officer. The delays caused by the time needed to conduct the testing. After the testing is conducted, you select the candidate. After the candidate is selected, you do an intensive background investigation, which can take several months, depending on where they've lived and how far we have to go to find them, all the information about them. They have to do a psychological examination, they have to do a medical examination, and then they're ready for the police academy. Once they start the police academy, that's another 6-month program. If all that pans out and they go through the whole process successfully, then we bring them on at the Yuba City Police Department. They start their field training program. That's also a 5 to 6 month program. So by the time that's all weighed out, it's approximately 13 months before we realize an officer from the testing to the date that he becomes an officer. A CSO, on the other hand, while they do have to still do the background examination, very comprehensive, they still have to do a psychological examination, they still have to do a field training program. We can have them on the road in 4 to 5 months. There has been a nationwide shortage of qualified officers, an exodus of retirements, and a decrease in available police academies. The end result is a very, very competitive market, and we're seeing that crunch all over the state and all over the United States. One alternative to increasing the proactive patrolling and directed enforcement for our patrol officers would be the addition of the CSOs. Although many of the background requirements are the same, again, the time would be reduced. The Appeal Democrat published a story on January 24th about patrol staffing issues in the Yuba City area. The article highlighted staffing deficiencies and spoke about our department's efforts to increase our staffing. We're very confident, and statistics show that we are making progress in filling all of our sworn positions. In the current economic climate of low unemployment rates, competitive marketing for different officers' positions, and the inability of the police academies to conduct more academies per fiscal year, without intervention, we feel the issue will continue to be exacerbated, and we're going to continue to revisit this time after time. I appreciate what the council has done with the expediting the testing process and with the bonuses to bring lateral officers over. That has made a big difference. And I feel like that's going to take care of itself after a time, but we're going to always be fighting that. Hiring CSOs is a viable alternative to fill the void that's created by this lack of officers also. It does not place a new sworn officer on the road, but it does allow for the current officers to spend more time being proactive and working on directed enforcement as the CSOs respond to the cold calls. CSOs will continue to respond to calls without suspects. Approximately 25% of all of our calls can be handled by a CSO. Although these are only 25% of our call volume, most of these calls are very time intensive. If they process a crime scene, they could be there for several hours that they could spend that the officer wouldn't have to. Traffic accidents, many times the officer can do the initial stuff. If there's a hit and run, if there's a suspect involved, the officer can do the initial report and leave. The crime processing or the traffic processing, directing traffic, can be handled by the CSO. These calls can cause patrol officers to be unavailable for hours at a time. Current staffing for CSO is 3 on patrol and 1 in investigations. And again, 50% lead CSO and another 50% in the crime analyst. The addition of these 2 new CSOs who will be assigned to patrol will allow us to analyze the most appropriate time to schedule them. Obviously, it's going to most likely be at the peak call volume time. Currently, they work Monday through Friday on 10-hour overlapping schedules from 0600, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. When one CSO is on vacation, sick, or in training, it causes additional workload on patrol staffing, and once again, the officers are spending more time responding to all kinds of calls. The total salaries and benefits annually projected at step 1 would be $72,843 per community service officer, times 2 would be $145,686. The alternative to this is to not approve the position, and the recommendation of staff is to approve the additional position of community service officers, make budget adjustments as necessary to the police patrol budget. And with that, I'll open it up to questions from the council.
Any questions from council?
To the mayor.
Councilman Buckland.
Chief, in regard to auto theft, how many of the CSOs that we currently have wear the coveted 10850 or the coveted CHP 10851 pin? That's a recovery of stolen vehicles.
Okay, so I don't know if 2 of them have it this year, but one of them had it last year or the year before last. That's Lucy Lane, who gets it almost every year.
So that the recovery rate for a 10851 pin is
Recovery rate?
the recovery number. It's a lot, right?
Well, right, yes.
So
Specific number.
yeah, I don't know exactly how many they have to recover, but to get the coveted pin, yeah, there's a lot of qualifications, and probably about 1% to 2% of even police officers achieve that rate within a year. So that is one of the great benefits that we have to the CSOs. Chief, regarding longevity with the department, what do our current CSOs, the length duration that they've been with us, would it be typically longer than what we've seen with new entry-level police officers?
Going through the current staffing, I know that one of them has been here over 22 years. One of them's been here between 15 and 20 years. The other one's been here and in different agencies almost 15 years. The other one is brand new. I left one out. And the other one's been here for almost 20 years too, Eric Ball.
Right.
So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
So they're members of our community that have found a niche in police work that doesn't require them to be a higher level of service, but they do a tremendous amount of service to our community in relieving the workload off of police officers. And if you would, just for a little bit on the investigation side, I know that you talked about it briefly, but their involvement with crime scene processing and things like that. Could you just expand upon that just a little bit for the public?
Absolutely. So when you go to a crime scene, it's very time intensive. For instance, a homicide with multiple victims, you have a lot of evidence that has to be processed. In order to have an officer do it, he's going to spend could be a couple days doing it. So the CSOs get there, they rope off the crime scene. They've all been trained to a level, and most of them to a higher level than just evidence processing. All the stuff has to be packaged, preserved, documented, photographed, and then they send it off. Actually, they're the ones that drive it off to the Department of Justice, whether it be Chico or Sacramento. It's a very time-intensive process, and we're very fortunate to have the CSOs we have right now that have the ability to do that, but it is very, very time-intensive.
All right, that's all the questions I have. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Question or comments from other council members? Seeing none, I would look for a motion,
Move to approve, sir.
I'll second.
and that would be recommendation A and B.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we have a unanimous vote. Thank you for bringing these to us. We definitely appreciate any tools that we can bring to keep the public safer.
Thank you, Mayor, and on behalf of the police department and myself, we really appreciate your guys' support. Thank you.